Hello and welcome back to the Shepherd's Rest Dog Talk. This is episode 35B.
I'm Cam and this is Julie.
Yes, this is the B'rit Hadashah, or the New Testament discussion on this week's Torah Portion. And just like last week, we are picking up right where we left off. Last week we saw Yeshua sending out his disciples. They went into all of the neighboring cities, only to the house of Israel, not to the Gentiles yet. They are casting out demons, healing, doing all the things that Yeshua's been doing. And they were doing it on a larger scale because now everyone's doing it. So they all come back, and we're picking up this week in Mark 6:14 to 29. And we see in 14 it says, "And King Herod heard, for his name had become well known," talking about Yeshua. So now he's getting all these reports from all over about the healings, and he's getting nervous. Because he is not a legitimate, he's not a legitimate king of the Jews. So he certainly doesn't want a legitimate line of David coming into power and usurping what he is trying to get. Because like I said, he does not have the title King of the Jews like his father did. So let's talk it though. Yes, he would like it. So we're going to talk about that for a minute. We're going to talk about the lineage and how this all comes about. So we're getting a history lesson today.
All right, I love history.
So you have Herod Antipas. That's who we're talking about in this. He had the area of the Galilee. He considered himself the rightful sole heir of his father, King Herod the Great's kingdom. So let's take it back to where it started with King Herod the Great. Basically, he was given all of the greater Israel area. Really, he had control of all of that. And he had several sons and daughters. So we're mainly going to talk about three of them today. We have Herod Philip of Rome. He stayed in Rome, and he was kind of a big wig over there. We have Herod Aristobulus. Now, he was, I know, that's a funny name.
Their names, they just kill me.
I don't even know if that's how you say
Herod,
it. But
A, B, C, and D? I mean, that's much
there was
easier.
Those two. Because when I was doing the research and you go back, you're like, oh, so there were three of them with that name. Herod Philip, I mean, there were two brothers named Philip, actually.
Wow.
So, but we're not going to, we may touch on one of those here in a minute. So Aristobulus, let's talk about him. And I've talked about him before, actually. He was one of two sons born to Miriam the First, who was from the Hasmonean side. He was, because Herod the Great actually, he converted to Judaism and married Miriam the First. So he had two sons, Aristobulus and Alexander. He sent them away to Rome to be educated in the aristocratical, whatever, in the higher ups. He
have a proper formal education.
Yes. So the two boys that were sent away came back, and Aristobulus was actually going to be the one to completely take over everything that King Herod had. But one of his older brothers was jealous of that position because, see, he came from Herod's line and Miriam's line. So he was and he was the firstborn out of him and Alexander, so he would have been the rightful heir king-wise, because the Hasmoneans thought they were
not biblically, but politically.
But politically, exactly.
Gotcha.
So one of the older brothers from a previous marriage was jealous and convinced Herod the Great that Aristobulus and his brother Alexander had committed treason. So he had them strangled along with their mother out of jealousy. Or out of fear, really, fear and anxiety. Exactly. So here we have Antipas with Miriam the Second. So obviously Antipas is like, well, I'm next in line then. So now let's fast forward to the time of Yeshua's ministry, not the time of his birth, but his ministry. Now you have Antipas, who is probably around the same age as Yeshua, and he's claiming to be the king of the Jews, but Rome would not give him that title. All right, so before King Herod the Great died, he arranged a marriage between Antipas and a Nabatean princess. The Nabatean kingdom was just east of the Jordan River, Syria, a little bit of Syria, Jordan, and the Negev. And they were constantly fighting. That's a lot. They had a lot of land. They controlled that trade route. And King Herod and the Nabateans were constantly at odds and fighting. So they solved it the way any ancient kingdoms would. Let's marry our kids. So they were married for 30 years, 3 decades, when Yeshua went into ministry. So I guess he was a lot older. So
pretty much his old.
Yeah, well, he was a very young teenager when that marriage happened.
Yeah. So
he may have been 10 years older than Yeshua. 10 to 15.
Even 20. I mean, you're looking at a 50 years old is not old.
Yeah.
No, just saying.
All right. So they were married for 30 years. So here's where the story gets interesting. Here's the soap opera. Okay. So Antipas has to go to Rome on some legal business and stays with his brother, Herod Philip.
Yes.
Herod Philip is married to another brother's daughter. Her name is Herodias. Herodias has a daughter named Salome. That's the daughter between Herodias and Philip. Salome.
Hope you're following this.
Yes, I hope you're following this. I know it's really... Okay. So Herod Antipas stays with them, and he likes the way Herodias looks. So he convinces her, well, don't you want to... Wouldn't you rather be married to a future king than to Philip? You know,
second place,
right? Because remember... He thinks he's going to be next in line for he thinks he's going to be next in line for the throne. So he convinces her to divorce Philip, and she says, okay, but you have to divorce your wife. So he does. He goes back and divorces his wife. Well, before he could, she escapes and goes back to her father, and then that comes
divorcement.
Right. But also, if he's going to be king of the Jews, he can't divorce her to marry someone else. It's against Torah.
That's right.
And she does it because she's Roman.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter. She doesn't care. But John calls them out on this and says it's not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. And that is why John was imprisoned. And then we know the story of...
head on the platter.
Head on the platter. So what happened... So when he made this announcement that it's not lawful for her to be your wife, he basically cut off any hope that she had of being the queen.
Right.
Because now there would be an uprising, the people wouldn't have it. He called her out, basically, and now it's not going to it will never happen in the eyes of the Jewish people.
Right.
And she left her husband for this. I mean, her eyes, she's like, excuse me? So she convinced Antipas to arrest John the Baptist. Now, here's something interesting that you only get from Mark. Mark says that Antipas liked listening to John.
Yes.
And that he respected him. And it saddened him to imprison him. So that's why he put him in the prison down by the Dead Sea. So he wasn't constantly being tormented by his new wife to put him to death, because it says she wanted him arrested and killed.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me of Pilate, kind of, but the wife here wants to have him killed, but Pilate's wife is like, don't you kill him. You know, but just the influence of the wives.
Yes, or how about Potiphar with Joseph?
Yes.
You know, Joseph.
He liked her.
He liked Joseph.
He liked him.
Yes.
The wife liked him too. That's where the problem was.
Right, but she wanted him imprisoned and killed, and he just put him away.
Yeah.
Right, because she couldn't have him.
Yeah.
So,
it's not like, if I can't have him, no one can.
Right. I guess so. But there is one really interesting nugget that I discovered this week, and that's found in Mark 10, starting in 11. Yeshua says, and he said to them, whoever puts away his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. All right, well, we take that as if you get divorced and remarry, you're committing adultery. But here's something very interesting. That is the Hebrew vav is what's used here, and it means it's kind of a cause and effect. So really, if it was translated correctly, it would read like this. Whoever puts away his wife in order to marry another commits adultery with her.
That's right.
And the same with the woman. He says, and if a woman puts away her husband in order to marry another, she commits adultery. Well, okay, first of all, at the time of Yeshua, women couldn't get a divorce. They couldn't put away their husbands, but Herodias did. So that might point to Yeshua specifically reiterating, yes, John said this was wrong. Now I'm telling you it's wrong. Because John's death gave way to Yeshua's rising.
Correct.
Really. I mean, Yeshua had a following.
Less of him, more of him.
Yes, but with John completely out of the way, then Yeshua really rose to the fame and had the respect of all of John's followers. Because before, it was kind of like, well, John says to do it this way. Well, his disciples do this, and you're doing this. But this really just put all the focus and the salvation on Yeshua instead of on someone else.
Yeah.
So I just thought that was a good lesson for us, because so many people who have been through divorce and remarried just have this guilt.
I'm glad you brought that up, because this is very important to understand. When someone gets divorced for whatever reason, abuse, adultery, whatever, and they are divorced, and they were not the adultering one, and then they fall in love and get married again, that's not adultery.
Right.
It's when the point for you to leave your spouse is because you want to be with someone else.
That's right.
I put this out there as just a caveat for someone. I don't have anyone in particular, the person may say. Yeah. I just want somebody else. Okay.
Right.
Well, beware, because in a weird way, that's the idea of the Lord saying, when you look at that woman in your heart, you've already cheated.
Yes.
Okay. So that idea of I just want anybody but her can still put you in the spot of being adulterous, because you're wanting something else.
Correct.
So either already involved or with the idea of hoping to get involved with anyone but them. It's the same heart. So I just say that out there,
Yes.
Something to be aware
of. Good point. Good point. All right. So then Antipas has a birthday. Moving on with the story, Antipas has a birthday, and his stepdaughter, Salome, it's thought that she danced nude. Yes. It was a strip, dance for all the nobles.
Very provocative.
And all that. Right. And it pleased him, and he said, whatever you want, up to half of my kingdom is yours. Does this story remind you of anything else in the Bible? Anywhere?
Esther.
This is just like the story of Esther. Except the endings are different, but they're the same. They're kind of different, but they're the same. Because while John ended up dying because of this, well, let's just get back to the story. So she danced. He said, I'll give you whatever you want. So she wasn't sure. She could have had anything.
Exactly.
So she went to her mother. This shows the amount of hate and disdain that she had for someone who was already in prison.
Yeah.
You could have anything. What do you want?
And she went to her mom.
She went to her mom.
She didn't even say what she wanted.
Right.
She said,
she went to her
what
mom,
do you want, Mom?
And her mom said, I want the head of John the Baptist on a platter. It grieved Antipas. He liked John. He didn't want to kill him. He knew, just because of what he said when Yeshua rose, oh my gosh, it's John the Baptist rose from the dead.
Yeah.
He knew there was a higher power working behind these pious men, but he had so much of the world in him, so much of the Roman and Hellenistic culture that he never could cross over. He never could make that commitment. He enjoyed listening to him, but how many people enjoy listening to a good sermon, but actually crossing over and obeying and doing it, that's a whole different story.
Yeah.
So it's so much easier to get pulled back into your old ways. Anyway, so he sent him down to behead John, showed it to her, and the story pretty much ends there. But going back to it, paralleling with the Esther story. So here you have the king who had all his nobles. He wanted Vashti to parade nude in front of everyone, and she refused. So it's believed that he had her executed, that he had the same thing.
Put away.
And so just like Vashti's death allowed Esther to become queen, therefore giving salvation to the Jews, John the Baptist didn't die in vain. It allowed for Yeshua to really come up to power, who is our salvation. So in both stories, you have the drunken men, the naked women. Not that different from today. And death. But just as Paul says, God works all things together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose. So he worked both of the deaths out to bring salvation to Israel.
He talks about that it must die, the piece of corn must die in order to bring forth life. So that's just staying true to the pattern.
And this portion ends with Yeshua grieving on hearing the death of John the Baptist, he retreats with his disciples and they go off to mourn. And that's it. That's all this portion had. I don't have a lot of. I know. I don't have a lot of.
And who married, and they had a baby, and that baby had a baby, and then he had a brother and a cousin. What?
Yes. So there was another king, Philip, Philip the Tetrarch.
Oh yeah, I remember him.
He is not the Philip that Herodias was married to, because this next story would be kind of gross. But Salome ended up marrying Philip the Tetrarch.
Yeah.
And so
I think that's why I knew that, because of who she married.
Ironically, Herodias's brother, Herod Agrippa, had convinced the emperor that Antipas had committed treason, so they were banished to Spain and died. Antipas and Herodias, the ones who, and Agrippa got the kingdom. Yeah, and he was just
they said it was safer for the pigs in Herod's house.
That's right.
Than it was to be a family member.
I mean, seriously, when I was reading all of this, I thought, good grief.
And we think we created soap operas. What?
No, that was, I mean, it didn't matter. Family, no one was safe.
That's right. I mean, they really, even the pigs were safer.
Right, and fear is what drove all of that.
Yeah.
Fear of losing what wasn't even rightfully theirs.
Right.
Whew, big epiphany, big lesson for us today. Yeah. Well, that's all I have for you today. We will see you. Yes, I know. My head's still spinning. I studied and studied and studied trying to keep all the Herods straight, and I still got them a little messed up. But anyway, that's all I have for you today. Once again, like Cam said, if you do like our lessons, please share them with your friends. And we will see you next week with episode 36.
36?
Yes. We hope you have a wonderful week.
Shalom.